everyone. Thank you for joining us on our Mindwise Psychology Webinar Series, our first one of 5. We have Julieanne Williams, a psychologist who has joined us today to talk about WorkCover and working with WorkCover clients. We're excited to have this series. It's a quick 30-minute interview where we'll talk a little bit about, with some of the psychologists that are in our practice here at Mindwise Psychology. We're based in Toowoomba on the Darling Downs. Now with me, I also have my co-director and owner, Veronica McEwen. We're both going to be present for every single interview, and we'll interview the psychologists in our practice and counsellors in our practice around what areas they're working in, a little bit of an intro about themselves, and hopefully some questions and resources that you might find helpful as GPs and as allied health professionals. So thank you for your time. This is about 30 minutes, and I'd like to thank you to Veronica for helping with the interviewing and supporting, and also thank you to Julieanne for joining us today for the first session.
Thank you.
So Julieanne, would you like to just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me in the exciting first series of the Mindwise Moments. So I'm a registered psychologist with Mindwise. Previous to this role, I've had over 10 years experience as a vocational rehabilitation consultant, which means that I've been in kind of the rehab, insurance, WorkCover space for quite a long time. On top of that, I decided to go and finally finish my qualifications as a psychologist. So I guess that complements nicely with the experience that I previously had as a rehab consultant. So I work with WorkCover clients, and today was just really hoping to share a little bit about how psychology fits within the recovery process, particularly when we're talking about WorkCover, especially when we're supporting people dealing with both physical and psychological impacts of a workplace injury. I guess in a nutshell, short version, our job as psychologists in this space is to help people not just cope, but also function, particularly when we're talking about a return to work. That means working on things like emotions, motivation, cognitive issues, and just ultimately helping them get back to meaningful lives. And we know that work plays a really big part of that. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's a very good nutshell. Thank you very much, Julieanne.
Julieanne, can I ask you a question? Because you mentioned that you had been in rehab and then you decided to train as a psychologist. Tell me a little bit about why you felt moving towards being a psychologist might have been a better space than just staying in the rehab.
Yeah, I think the rehab consultants play a really strong role in the return to work process, but I felt like there was elements missing. I felt like there wasn't enough importance placed on things like those emotional regulation skills, on how to make sense of what's happened for them and how to recover. The rehab space was very a practical kind of approach to it, which I felt kind of left out kind of the psychological part of it. And I just wanted to be able to combine the two. So I felt like it was a well-rounded, kind of more holistic approach to a return to work.
I would imagine having that skill base and then coming in as a psychologist, it's kind of put you well ahead of the game in that WorkCover space.
Yeah, I hope so. I think I do bring a unique perspective, just given that I've done both roles, also been heavily involved with WorkCover for many, many years, and also your big insurers, your big third-party insurers. So kind of understanding their process and the legislation under which they have to operate can be really helpful for explaining to clients what the process is, what it means, what needs to be done. I find that quite helpful, and I think the clients appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you and I have talked about the combining of that, I do think that is a strength that you've brought to those clients when you have worked with them, is that you know this process so well, and you know exactly who to talk to in WorkCover.
Yeah.
And I think just reassuring the clients in that way has been an absolute strength.
Yeah.
Julieanne, I guess the other part to it is it's a client focus, but it's also knowing how you work with those other professionals, including the GPs and allied health professionals. And when you describe psychology, though, how does it fit? How do you assess their functioning? What do you do?
Their functioning, it's a couple of different ways we do it, I guess. obviously with anybody that we work with, we start with a really solid psychological assessment. So we're looking at kind of where's this person at? What are they experiencing? Where do they want to go? Is there anything underlying? So anything that predates the injury also is really useful. So it's not just a mood checklist, but it goes a bit deeper. So it's about functioning. So how are the symptoms affecting things like sleep, thinking and cognitive processes, motivation to do things, decision making, and just their general day-to-day functioning. Also looking for trauma responses or chronic stress, which I have noticed can go really undetected in those early stages of recovery. Once we've done that, we can move on to things like a functional psychology assessment. And sometimes case managers from WorkCover can request these. And it looks specifically at how a client's mental health is impacting their ability to either work, study, or some type of work-related task. We might assess things like concentration, tolerance to stress, how they go following a structure, how they're engaging in interpersonal tasks. From that, basically, we can provide, or I can provide, clear recommendations around what duties might be appropriate. Things like how many hours at work they might be able to tolerate, what breaks might be needed, or even what modifications to their actual roles at work might help them to be able to return safely and have that positive return to work experience.
Julieanne, I'm really curious, like, because you talk about that functional assessment. How does a functional assessment differ, so from a more generalized psychological assessment that is more common within the psychology space? What's different about those two techniques?
Yeah, good question. I guess a typical psychological evaluation might focus more on diagnosing something like, say, depression or anxiety. A functional assessment is a bit more practical than that. It's about actual functioning, real world functioning. So things like, can they tolerate a 4-hour shift? Do they need a low stimulation environment? Are they capable of managing workplace interactions without becoming emotionally dysregulated? It's still a clinical process. It's still a clinical assessment, but the functional assessment is more application focused.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that something that you feed back to the client within the session when you're doing that, or is that something that you're just doing with WorkCover? Or
so we would always obviously inform the client of what we're doing and get their consent to do so, obviously, always. But it really is something that WorkCover requests. Okay. And the report goes straight to WorkCover, and WorkCover then choose to release that report to the client. If they're happy to, then I would have a session with the client where I would go through kind of, I guess, what my thoughts are about it that were gained through the assessment, and then also my recommendations, but also why I'm making the recommendations that I am, and just to see whether they think the same. Do they think that's going to be useful? Do they think I've missed something? It's kind of that collaborative approach as well.
Okay. I'm really curious, what sort of psychological models or therapeutic approach do you tend to find you use in the work that you do with the WorkCover clients?
Yep. I guess with all clients, everything we do is evidence-based. So we try to use, our sessions in a supportive way, but we're also looking to make them structured and goal-orientated. To do that, we would generally use approaches like cognitive behavioural therapy, acceptance commitment theory or therapy, trauma-focused therapy. Depending on what's happening for the client, if pain's involved, we might do some pain psychology, just depending on the presentation. If EMDR is clinically appropriate, we might also have a look at that, particularly for trauma. The aim is always to reduce the symptoms, but more importantly, what we're trying to do is build functioning. So we're trying to help people, I guess, manage emotions, think more flexibly, regulate behaviour, things like that. So we just We just adapt depending on what the client specifically needs and what seems to be working best for them in terms of what model we use. Yeah.
What about as a GP? Oh, sorry, Veronica. I was just interested. What about as a GP? And so I guess if you think about GPs or allied health professionals, if they're working alongside you with that treatment team, and they're hearing from their clients that they're just afraid to go back to work, what can they do, or how does that work between yourself and the GP?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would be, I would imagine it's very, very common for the GPs to hear that, one of their patients is particularly anxious about returning to work. It's really common, particularly when the injury is of a psychological nature. In that instance, a psychological support, is warranted, and the earlier, the better. The sooner we can address the psychological components, the less entrenched the avoidance, fear, or dysfunction, or whatever it may be, becomes. GPs are fantastic for being able to identify that stuff early, because generally a WorkCover client, the first person they speak to about this sort of stuff is the GP. At that point, a referral across to a psychologist would be best. They can either do that themselves, and that can be done by writing on like the work capacity certificate that psychological intervention is recommended, or they can do a letter across to WorkCover, or if that's still a bit of a slow process, they can also refer a client under a mental health care plan, which we can use until the WorkCover stuff kicks in. And we get some approval from them for some sessions under WorkCover. But yeah, absolutely, a referral straight across to psychologists would be best, just so we can jump on it quickly for these people.
Julieanne, is return to work always the primary goal when it's a WorkCover referral?
Return to work is definitely placed as one of the high priorities. We do know, though, that to be able to do that successfully, we need to work on all the stuff that's underlying, which may impact the ability to have that successful return to work. So I guess when clients are looking at a return to work once they've had an injury, whether it be physical or psychological, there's a lot of fear. Fear of re-injury, sometimes fear of going back and having to face colleagues who might be passing judgment on the fact that they're on WorkCover, dealing with their management. So it can be quite a turbulent time, and we need to help the client work through those fears. We need to help them rebuild their sense of safety. Even sometimes we've got to help them reestablish structure in their lives, which makes that return to work more likely to succeed. So whilst it's a priority, we know it's a bit of a scaffold, and we need to kind of come back to the foundational level and go, okay, what do we need to build up so that this person can have that successful return? So that can even include things like skill building. So it could be about communication. How do we help this client be able to communicate what they're needing, what they don't feel safe doing? It could be that conflict resolution stuff that might have been an issue in the past for them that makes them feel unsafe going back, because perhaps they might not be able to voice what they need to. So we can help them through with that. Could be about setting boundaries so we can avoid things like burnout and whatnot. And it can just be even practical stuff like the pacing and the planning of their return to work. So what does that look like? Would you return 2 days a week? Would we just have 3-hour blocks? Will we have a day in between, which gives you like a rest day where you can kind of regroup your emotional energies before you return to work? So yeah, definitely a priority, but I think we can't forget or deprioritize that scaffolding, that foundational stuff.
Cool. Tanya, I think you were going to mention something or say something earlier. Did I interrupt you? That's the only thing about Zoom, is that whoever's got the floor keeps the floor.
That's all good. No, thank you. No, I think it's just keeping in mind about how we work together as that collaborative team because, as you said, you've had that experience as a rehab, sort of working in that area, and then the psychologist and then the GP. I think sometimes we can feel like we're working in isolation, and we're all just doing our individual bits. And I think it's good you've got that overarching perspective of what that looks like. But maybe sometimes for GPs or allied health professionals that are listening to this, they're still feeling like they're isolated in that singular world. So I think it's nice to hear how we all fit in together. But no, you're addressing.
Yeah.
Julia, I think you didn't exactly speak to this point, but I do think this is a valid issue that happens for many clients that are on WorkCover, is that idea of the stigma of being on WorkCover and that idea of that faking it. They're just faking it. Is that something you do come across fairly commonly with clients that have been referred under that, or?
Yeah, most definitely. It can be one of the hardest parts, I guess, of the whole WorkCover process is that for these clients, they know what's happening for them and they know the impact on their lives, but particularly when it comes to a psychological injury, because we can't see it so much as we could a physical injury, there's this need that I see a lot where people have to continually justify or explain what's happening for them and why they're on WorkCover. But I unfortunately, because the WorkCover scheme is actually a really great one, which is a safety net for the workers of Australia, which we need. But unfortunately, it does have a stigma attached to it where, if you're on it, it's because you want a holiday. You want a paid holiday. It's not because you actually just are not in a place at the moment where you can safely be in the workplace. So that is a lot of work that we do around clients is, this is a very real experience for you. This is what's happening for you. This is the steps that need to be done. And it's best done whilst you're under the protection of WorkCover. But also practical things that we can do is I help the clients work out a script. So what can you say to someone when they come at you with those type of comments? And then also just how to be able to deal with the distress of having people think that you're faking and how to kind of put a bit of distance between that so it doesn't become a personalized thing. It's just this person's opinion and nothing more. And how do I cope with that?
Julieanne, do you have any advice, I guess, around that for GPs when they are actually talking to their clients about the possibility of going on WorkCover? Because a lot of that initial conversation is happening with GPs, isn't it?
Absolutely. The first touch point is usually always the GP. Yeah. So there's a lot that kind of rests on their shoulders, helping the client navigate the space, but also make those type of important decisions. A lot of people don't want to access the WorkCover scheme because of all the reasons we've just said. I think it's useful for anybody working with someone who's looking at going on WorkCover just to normalise the process. This is an insurance scheme that's put into place to support Australian workers. It's like any other type of insurance. If you crash your car, you're going to go to your car insurer and say, hey, I need some help to fix my car, to get back up and running. This insurance is the same as any other insurance. It's there for a reason. And if it needs to be accessed, then there should be no shame about that. It just is like an insurance, like anything else. You're on it until you don't need it anymore and you're off and running. So I think that can help kind of taking the shame out of it.
Yeah, no, great points. I'm curious as well, is there different ways that clients might be presenting to GPs that might be good indicators or cues for GPs to just dig a little bit deeper into that so that referral can happen for the client? Is there anything that is more common maladaptive coping mechanisms or indicators that would be good to watch for?
Yeah, I think I guess in my experience, it really plays out as an absolute fear of returning to work. And it may not make a lot of sense to anybody else because I guess perhaps it feels like an overreaction to something that's happened. But it's this absolute fear of, I just can't do it. I just can't go back. And then usually, we see the tears, we see, all those other symptoms. We see the shaking, the constant headaches, the constant feelings of nausea. So I guess your symptoms of anxiety, pretty prevalent at this stage. We also see a lot of avoidant behavior. So these people have gone from perhaps, getting up at 5 a.m. every day to get to work. They very rarely miss work, and now they're not getting out of bed till 2 p.m. They just can't. They can't face the world. They can't, it's safe at home. It's safe in bed. Whilst I'm there, I don't need to worry about anything else. So I think also looking out for those sleeping patterns with clients. Are we sleeping too much? Are we sleeping too little? And I guess things also like alcohol consumption increase as a coping mechanism. If we're turning to unprescribed medications as a coping strategy. I guess any of those kind of big flags that we kind of all know about: sleep, alcohol, drugs, avoidant behavior. They're probably your main ones.
I think that's a great point you make about that avoidant behavior, because I could imagine for GPs, maybe an earlier indicator too would be that client repeatedly coming to get a sick leave certificate, because I would imagine if we've begun that avoidant pattern, then that might be some of the earlier indicators, wouldn't it, of needing to get days off and then being able to prove that you needed the day off as well.
And I guess it's also like, and I've certainly seen that in my practice as well, where they're tapping then into WorkCover once they've run out of sick leave.
Yes.
And so they're looking at other options. And is that something the GPs could be considering WorkCover earlier, or, what could they be doing to help?
Yeah, definitely. And I think because the WorkCover process, as great as it is, it can be a bit of a slow process. So it is always best to jump on it earlier rather than later, because people, by the time they've used all their sick leave and most then go into their annual leave, there can be a gap between running out and WorkCover kicking in. So I think it is useful to even start the process a little bit sooner rather than later, because it can take up to months to have a claim approved.
Yep.
And that can then lead to an additional stressor for the client, where they now have financial stress. They're not being able to meet their financial obligations, whether it be rent, mortgage, just your basic necessities of life become a real struggle. And that just adds a whole nother level of complexity on what they're already dealing with. So sooner rather than later, I would say.
Yeah, no, good points. How much do you communicate with GPs as part of that WorkCover process? Because obviously you have a bit to do with WorkCover in that process, but how much of that then goes back to the GPs as well?
Yeah, we it's always best to have a collaborative approach. I just think things run smoother. Everyone's on the same page, but also the client isn't getting confused with conflicting information. So I think it's really useful if everyone can be communicating in some form. We're all extremely busy. We all know that. So, even just quick email exchanges or a quick letter off, I think is really useful. I attempt to talk to everybody in the team where I can. So I also speak to the WorkCover case manager as a bit of a standard rule, so I can understand what's going on from that perspective. If there's any other allied health professionals involved who I think might be able to provide some information that would be useful in my treatment planning, then I'll reach out to them as well. But definitely with the GP, because they're also usually dealing with things like medications, I think it's just good practice, particularly for the client, if we can have some communication around that. So particularly around medication changes. But I'm also happy to flag things like perhaps a psychiatry referral to a GP. Sometimes we kind of get to the level where I just think this person really needs some extra support. And obviously that referral has to come from the GP. Mm-hmm. So that sort of stuff will always communicate, but yeah, try and keep in touch with the GP kind of session 1, session 6, and then kind of flow on from there as is needed. So where I feel like it might be useful for the GP to have this information is usually when I'll pass it on.
Okay, fantastic. In terms of the referral letters that the GPs might send to yourself or other psychologists, is there particular information that you find very helpful for them to include, or do you cover most of that in your intakes?
Yeah, look, I mean, I guess everyone's different, but I guess we all, as professionals in our field, always do our own intake session. So in terms of information, I don't think there's anything specific other than to really flag that this person is on WorkCover or is looking to access WorkCover. If there is a claim number, it would be great to have the claim number, because that's how the world runs.
That I think our admin staff like that too, because that's less work.
That's great. But honestly, and any medication. So what medication, what dosage, and how long they've been on it. That just gives us an idea of where the client's sitting in terms of their medication. The rest of the information, though, to be honest, is all gathered in the intake session. And it's useful from a rapport building, but also information gathering perspective that most of that information is gained in that first session anyway.
Yeah. I think that's great to know, because I think none of us like doing mountains of paperwork.
Oh, no.
And whatever we do, we want it to be useful. So I think that's really good information for the GP referrers to have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I mean, I guess in summary then, is there anything in particular that I guess to wrap things up that you would like, if we're getting closer to that stage, is it wrap up in terms of some tips or some recommendations or things you'd like to say to GPs and the allied health professionals?
Yeah. Look, I think, to wrap up, psychology does play a really important part in someone's successful return to work. We're not there just to talk about feelings, far more than that. We're trying to help people recover emotionally, rebuild their sense of self, learn to manage stress, re-engage in life. This is best done as part of a team. So this collaborative approach is just really important. I think referrals made sooner rather than later make a massive amount of difference in terms of looking at people's recovery rates and how quickly that happens. And I think, just taking the stigma away for these clients / patients around accessing the WorkCover scheme, which is there for a reason. And that's basically it. I think just for GPs, it is knowing that also, they play a really crucial role for these people in turning their lives around, but also in their recovery. And they do a great job of it. We just need to keep it going.
Yeah. Thank you, Veronica. Is there anything else you'd like to add in terms of your thoughts around engaging with WorkCover as a psychologist? And
probably not so much in terms of my experience with accessing the WorkCover, but more just to express how grateful we actually are to have Julieanne in our team, because I think that's probably one of the strengths at Mindwise, is that we have tried to pull a team together of people that have diversity in their skill base, so that as GPs, they've got that confidence to be able to refer to Mindwise, knowing that we have a team that's got diversity, has wealth of different experiences. And I definitely think that WorkCover space was not one we had anyone particularly expertise in, whereas I think when we did get Julieanne on board with that, it was really grateful, because she kind of did come with this wealth of experience in that rehab area, which I think for us as psychologists, we've got that psychology space covered, but I think to really understand that ins and outs of WorkCover can be an intricacy that I certainly don't proclaim to have a great deal of expertise in. I love the client work and supporting the client, but just that extra bit that Julieanne does bring, I've been really grateful to have her, that I can sometimes go and just check, I've got this WorkCover client, Julieanne, what's your take on it? So I think it's probably less about my thoughts around that, but just more that it's nice to know we've got that level of expertise in the team.
Yeah, no, it is. And thank you, Julieanne, for being part of the team and yeah, just reassuring the doctors that when you're doing a referral, you can refer in, and we have quite a depth of experience, including Julieanne's. And we hope to have conversations with more of the team so that you can hear a bit about our depth and the different people we have in our team. It's so exciting when we've got, around 15 practitioners here, and you'll hear some of their stories and what they have to offer. And we're very grateful that Julieanne put her hand up first, because we certainly see a fair few referrals coming in for WorkCover. It is an area that we service, and it's an area of need in our community. And it's great to have someone like Julieanne that can offer that experience in this space where we can support our local community practitioners as well as our clients with that and WorkCover. So thank you, Julieanne, for your time. And thank you, Veronica, for your time. And to all the GPs out there, our next session is coming up again on the 16th of July at the same time. And we'll be interviewing and talking to Nafissa. And she'll be talking to us about feeling overloaded and managing anxiety and OCD across a lifespan, and how to recognise OCD and anxiety in different age groups, and the most common forms of treatment modalities to support recovery and resilience. So I look forward to that. Feel free to join in. The series will continue on. We've got another 4 more to go. And if you'd like to connect with Julieanne or the team here at Mindware, you're welcome to reach out to our reception at contact@mindwarepsychology.com.au, or you can phone us on 46464953 and drop in if you wanted to. We're at 121 West Street. We're not too far. We're based in the middle of town. So you're welcome to always drop in if you are going by and want to say hello. Or we can come out and visit your practice if you would like us to come and visit your practice and chat to your colleagues there at the practice as well. We'll have this available online. We'll pop this up on our socials, as well as popping it up on our website. So thank you, everyone, for joining, and thank you, Julieanne, for being first one up. Thank you, everyone.